Okay, welcome to the second lecture for Module 7, marijuana. We will be talking about, we're actually talking about short and long-term effects of marijuana. Please ignore my incorrectly bolded topic here. Part 1 was about intro, absorption, elimination. This lecture is about short and long-term effects, and lecture 3 is about dependence and withdrawal. So marijuana affects neurotransmitter function in the brain, primarily in the hippocampus. And the hippocampus has a high concentration of cannabinoid receptors. And you'll remember THC is a cannabinoid. It's one of many different cannabinoids found in marijuana. And interestingly enough, our brain has receptor sites that are made specifically for cannabinoids. They are in the hippocampus, and we have these receptor sites because the body also has endogenous cannabinoids. So what that means is that we have compounds that are similar to THC that are made within the body. Anandamide is one of them. And it's a naturally occurring cannabinoid in the body, and it binds to the cannabinoid receptors. And it regulates communication between the neurons and plays a role in learning. So if you'll recall back from our first unit, the hippocampus is the area of the brain associated with memory and motor control. And so the cannabinoid receptors, the endogenous cannabinoids in the body, play a role in learning and memory because of their location in the hippocampus. So that's cannabinoids that are inside the body. When exogenous or outside cannabinoids are introduced to the system, it can disrupt it. So that's what THC does. So THC is a cannabinoid that comes from the plant into our body, and it produces the sensation of being high because it binds with these receptors that we already have inside of our body. But it also compromises the function of the way those systems work. In particular, it impacts the learning and the memory functions associated with the hippocampus. Just to take a step back for a moment, this is moving forward. So how long does the high last, the sensation of being intoxicated from THC? For smoking, it takes about 2 minutes to set in, and reaches peak blood level in about a half hour to an hour later, and it lasts for about 2 to 4 hours. Eating cannabis products, it takes about an hour to kick in. Peak blood level isn't reached until 2 or 3 hours later, and the effect lasts total for 4 to 6 hours. And so, again, we mentioned this before, it takes about 3 times the amount of cannabis to feel high using it through food than compared to smoking. That being said, there is a extremely low risk of overdose on THC. There are no cannabinoid receptors in the brainstem, which is the area responsible for our major biological functions like breathing, heart rate, vomiting, etc. Those receptor sites don't exist there. So the THC doesn't have an impact on those body systems. So it's a very relatively low risk drug in terms of coma or death or overdose. The acute effects of marijuana and THC in particular, bloodshot eyes, increased heart rate, pulse, and blood pressure, which can be dangerous if you have a pre-existing heart condition. So it'd be important to be aware of that. It can put some strain on the heart, and if somebody already has a heart condition, that's not a good combination. Users experience fluctuations in their breathing and body temperature. They can experience dry mouth and feeling a sensation of thirst. Those are the only physiological changes that happen in terms of the acute effects. But then there are the perceived impact, and one of those perceptions is an increase in appetite or hunger, sometimes called having the munchies. People can have some sensations of sort of dizziness or spinning, or feel like they might have a headache, feel a bit drowsy. Um, they can also experience a decrease in motor activity, so kind of a slowing of the body system, except for talkativeness. So they can feel kind of more relaxed and slow, but then actually be more talkative. Um, THC impairs concentration and attention because of its role in the hippocampus that associated with memory and also motor coordination. Um, THC impacts the way we attend to stimuli in our environment. And in particular, it can have an impact on driving because people who are intoxicated under THC cannot attend to peripheral stimuli as well. So they can kind of focus on driving, but if there's something happening on the periphery to the sides of them, they're less able to pay attention to that or to process that information. And those effects can last even after the high wears off. So I mentioned this a moment ago that THC stays in the system even after the user doesn't feel high anymore. And so it can still have an impact on your brain in that way. People who are intoxicated on THC often also experience a decreased inhibition or feeling more impulsive than they do when they are not under the influence. Some long-term effects of marijuana use is for smokers of marijuana, impaired lung function. So it is combustion of plant material being inhaled into the lungs. So you're going to get things like decreased lung capacity, increased phlegm. But those things reverse themselves when someone stops smoking. And interestingly, there is no associated long-term risk of lung cancer. And the book proposes a couple of explanations for why that might be. And that is what your lecture question is for this module. So what is your hypothesis for why it is that marijuana is not associated with risk of lung cancer? Another long-term consequence, it's more rare, but it is really debilitating when it happens, is cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Emesis is vomiting, and so hyperemesis means more vomiting. And it's periods of really intense vomiting that happens from chronic marijuana use. And I'm the impact of that can be, like I said, pretty debilitating, but it is more rare. Marijuana can also suppress the immune system, and there's some evidence that that's because of a particular type of immune response that's triggered by the cannabinoid receptors in the brain. Um, it can result in some strain on the heart. So again, that increasing that heart rate, putting some strain on the heart, lowering the pumping efficiency of blood in and out of the heart. Marijuana can affect fertility in both men and women. So you can see a lowered sperm count in men and also some gynecomastia, which is breast tissue development. Marijuana has an impact on the hormone prolactin, which is the hormone responsible for lactation, and therefore results in some breast tissue development in a very chronic long-term heavy use among men. It can also result in irregular menstrual cycles and menstrual cycles without ovulation in women. So this is actually friends of mine who live in a state where marijuana is legal were having trouble conceiving, and it was actually seemed to be a result of the um, male partner's use of marijuana. Once he quit smoking marijuana, they were able to conceive and have a child. So that's an important component here to all of these long-term effects. Most of them are reversible with abstinence from the substance. There is an exception, which is that information processing deficit, so challenges related to information processing. I mentioned before about driving and sensory input, being able to attend to information in your environment. that is diminished with smoking marijuana, and it seems to be a pretty stable long-term effect with chronic heavy use that isn't as easily reversed, or at least there's not evidence of that being reversible yet. Among babies whose mother smoked marijuana while they were in utero, there's a link to premature birth and smaller babies as well. Uh, There is some evidence for a unique long-term psychological impact of cannabis use, which is called amotivational syndrome. And it's really describing that kind of typical stoner stereotype that you might see portrayed in the media. So having apathy or not really caring about things, decreased effectiveness in being able to exercise goals or long-term planning, not really feeling ambitious or motivated, difficulties with concentration, attention, most often noticed by other people before the patient notices or the individual user notices. Um, it can be reversible. So if the person stops using cannabis, then these symptoms go away. But there's really a debate about whether or not this is something that's attributed to the way THC functions in the body, or if it's more of a cultural phenomenon, or again, that kind of is art imitating life question where this has become the stereotype or the trope about cannabis users. And so are we pathologizing something that is really just a cultural syndrome? That's it for this lecture. The third lecture will be next, and that's going to cover cannabis withdrawal, dependence, etc.